So at the moment, there's quite a lot of bad press going around, especially not just in the UK, America, worldwide, in fact, about some of the scenes that we are witnessing about the Black Lives Matter protests that are taking place. I'm going to just say this particular video in respect to some of the clips that we have been given to watch, to portray, to perhaps get angry at, to sympathize with, or basically clips that are basically enticing us to want change. And some of us are also using that video footage that's in the news or in the papers. Some of us are using it to get very, very angry with and get very, very hostile with. And unfortunately, we are losing the focus of why those protests are taking place. And it is difficult in these times, especially when there is COVID-19 happening. And, you know, people's anxieties are at an all-time high as people are considering the fact that other people are being selfish, are being unthoughtful, being uncaring, they are spreading the virus, etc., etc. There is that particular agenda that's out there. These are anxieties that understandably we can relate to, we can understand where these anxieties come from, and we can sympathize and we can empathize. However, we are missing the main point of the whole protest. As I've already said in a previous video, I was very much part of the union. Sadly, I'm not at the moment, but that's because of where I'm working at the moment. However, it doesn't mean that I have forgotten my roots and have forgotten my empowerment of my voice, because I do relate to the predicament that these people are in at the moment, and also what the press is choosing to focus on. What I will say is this, and I want you to just pause for thought and think about what I'm trying to get at, and think about the didactic message in the video that I'm, relating back to many of you. So years ago, I took part in a protest. It wasn't my first protest. I've been actually quite the activist for a number of years. And this particular protest was something called A Future That Works. Now, there were a huge amount of people in England that took part in this protest. Over 500,000, 1.5 million, I can't remember the exact quite numbers for this particular protest. And what I remember more about this particular protest is the whole training that we received prior to going to this particular protest in London. Now, we'd been part of peaceful marching and peaceful protests. We had the whole banners, to represent our particular trade union that we were representing. So we were used to all of that aspect of the whole, marching peacefully and making a stance and doing what we needed to do, whether it was outside House of Commons or outside number 10 Downing Street. We all did it obviously in a peaceful manner. The people that organised these events had made sure that obviously the police were made aware, and that various people who organised this had tried to do it the best way that they could. One particular protest I had been to had quite a lot of police presence. I'm sure it was the one for NHS, I think, that had quite a lot of police presence. And the one that I'm talking about in general, this time we were given quite a lot of training. In fact, we were given training in our groups as we went down to London on the trains. Now, I mention this because it is quite relevant and it is quite crucial to what you're probably seeing on the press now. So some of the training we received was, being given stab vests. I'm serious. We were given stab vests. Team leaders were established so that we would look after a particular group of people. We're making sure that we had each other's phone numbers and contact numbers, that we stayed together as a group. We'd done this peacefully before, but this was the first time where we were told, you know, look out for so-and-so and be careful of this person. And the stab vest was a serious thing as well. It was for our protection. And as I'll continue, you'll see why. The other thing we were told was that the union side, obviously you have your main part of your union, but you have the other side where you have a team of barristers as well that's available to you should you need them. And obviously they're only used in sort of worst case scenarios or very difficult scenarios, okay, within the union. And we were given we were given solicitors and barrister numbers should we end up being arrested. Now that's when the penny sort of drops, that this march that I'm going to could result in that. The other thing that we were informed about was the new Police Act that was established within the UK to do with kettling. So kettling at the time was a new police procedure where basically a group of people, whether it's small by say 10 people, whether it's 500, whether it's 1,000 or more, people can be kettled together and basically all arrested and kept, you know, within that sort of police barrier. Majority of the time it's done by police horses, and this was something that had just come out into England. It hadn't been really done before, but you know, obviously we were aware that there may be riot police at these protests, purely just to stand there as a symbol of, you know, we're here to protect you and vice versa. But to be told this information penny was dropping in my head that this is quite alarming, really. You know, why are we being told this as a safeguarding? Why are we told this? But understandably later on I did understand why.
There's a systematic ideological attack on the public sector from the government. I think it puts at risk the future of the country, really, and I think the government policy at the moment makes it far, far worse and is quite dangerous.
Now, as the protest went on, it was a very, very peaceful protest. I believe it started at like 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And it continued till about 4 o'clock in the evening, which is when most people dispersed peacefully and left London and headed back home. For me, I was heading back to Leeds. So obviously, you know, we were waiting on the various trains to get everybody out of the city, so to speak. Now, like I said, part of the protest where we started it, a particular bridge, we walked very, very quietly, very calmly. We had our whistles. We weren't making like a racket. We were just walking very, very slowly. And what I can remember about that particular march is, unlike the other protests I had been on, it took a very, very, very long time to walk, literally what me and you would probably consider to be a 10-minute walk. It took hours. During this particular protest, I think within about 3 or 4 hours into it, I decided to nip to a bathroom. And I remember looking around me, trying to find like a tube station maybe that was open, but obviously they were closed to stop commuters coming in and out in certain parts of where this protest was taking place. And I recall finding like a little cafe shop, Pret a Manger actually. Now, I went in and the queue was obviously quite big. I went in to use the bathroom. When I came out, I purchased a bottle of water and some sandwiches to keep me going, thinking that my colleagues are outside. They've not gone very far. They're taking their time to make part of this protest go longer. And when I stepped outside, they'd gone. So I was like, where have they gone? Looked at my mobile phone and I had quite a lot of missed calls and text messages saying, hey, come and catch up with us. We're not far down the road. It won't take you long to catch up. So that's exactly what I did. I started walking, and then as I got outside, I realized this huge, massive crowd of people that I was with, and I'm talking thousands of people in front of me, thousands of people behind and at the side. They'd all just gone, they'd dispersed, and it was almost like, wow, where is everybody? There was nobody on the actual protest. So it was really like weird. I started walking and then sort of like did speed walking to try and catch up. And I just remember coming towards like this bottleneck of people and thinking, okay, they're here, they're at this particular location, and maybe my friends are here somewhere that I can find them amongst this group. Because obviously when we had banners, you could easily spot your particular banner in the crowd. Ours was yellow, so it wasn't that difficult to spot. But as I got closer to this area, and it happened to be where there is Fortnum and Masons, and I believe Chabanel and Walker, and on the side corner, I think you've got the Ritz Hotel, if you know that particular area of London quite well. I didn't really take notice of the shops only till afterwards. And as I got closer and closer to this particular area, I just saw quite a lot of police actually surrounding that particular area. And the crowd seemed to be sort of stuck, almost like squashed together. It wasn't going forward, it wasn't going back. It seemed to be tunneling and seemed to be sort of like what we would call squished together of people. And I thought, this is really weird. Why is everybody sort of stopped here? And as I kept walking forward to try and get, you know, to the location point of where I needed to be, which is quite far from where I was, I felt something like hit my head. I wasn't sure at the time what it was, but it was coming from above. And I continued to try walking, and then more and more things kept flying. And I suddenly realized it was glass. And as I've like glanced up, there was a guy in, and I realized actually there were several people there, not just this one guy, but this one particular guy. And I didn't know the name of the group. I found out afterwards, but he was wearing a black outfit from top to bottom. So was the other people around him, obviously representing this particular group. And then on his face was the sort of like Machiavellian villainesque mask, which I think in American the group that is called Anonymous wears, and I believe these people also call themselves Anonymous as well. So obviously I'm in the middle of this mass group, and suddenly I feel pushing forward, back. I'm trying to sort of look up as to what's going on, but obviously this thing's falling down. It's large shards of glass. And that's when I realised that this is Fortnum and Masons at the side of me, and all the windows have been smashed at the top. I'm not sure how, but there was individuals like this gentleman I'm describing. He had a huge bottle of champagne, which back then probably cost £300-400, maybe more, for a large bottle. And he had sliced, I guess, the cap off, or taken the cap off, and was spraying it into the crowd. He was saying comments like, you know, we don't support the bourgeoisie, we are part of the proletariat, we don't want this, we don't want that. And I could hear people booing him, I could hear people shouting at him. Inside the top part of Fortnum and Masons, him and his comrades, I guess, were taking particular items from Fortnum and Mason, smashing them, throwing them into the crowd. There was just mass hysteria, to be honest. More and more windows were smashed in front of me. And as I'm trying to still get out of this crowd, it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter, to the point where you're feeling like sardines. And I remembered then in my head this warning about if you are kettled, because as I glanced forward to my side, I could see that there were police now turning up on horseback and pushing the crowds inwards and trying to basically, a bit like what you see in cowboy films, that's the best way I could describe it, when you see a herd of flock being sort of pulled and pushed together and put into a particular corner so that you can channel them to go in a particular place you want them to. And it was horrible. It was a horrible feeling. You are wedged between people. In front of me, there's innocent bystanders like myself, wedged in there, pushed in there, and you were basically wrong place, wrong time sort of scenario. Next thing I know, you know, obviously you're trying not to fall on the ground, you're trying not to have your head smashed open with the glass that's flying around, and whatever else these people were doing. You know, they were not part of this protest. They had their own agenda and had decided, obviously, to take part of it for whatever reason. Well, it's clear what their reason was. You know, they were there to tarnish the hard work of the other people that were peacefully protesting. Next thing, I remember seeing what I can describe as smoke bombs, petrol bombs, flying across from one part of the crowd to the other. That's the bit that was terrifying, because that's when the penny really dropped. I was like, oh, you know the word I was thinking of. I've got to get out. I've got to get out. I've got to get out. I'm working in education. Don't want to be arrested. It's part of my police check. I'm not someone who would break the law either. So, you know, to me, this is quite a serious thing. And remember, I'm the team leader. I wouldn't really be setting a good example to the people I'm supposed to look after if I got arrested myself, even though I've not done anything wrong, you know, at all. It's just that I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time with this crowd of people. As I'm pushing out and pushing out and pushing out to try and get to go where I need to be and get out of this situation, I was met with quite a lot of resistance. People were pushed, people were shoving each other. Some people landed on the floor, including myself. It was very, very horrible situation, okay? Your heart rate is escalating, your anxiety levels are an almighty high, and basically you just want out. And you want out for your own safety. It's that fight or flight scenario. Now, luckily, when I sort of moved past the crowd, there was more and more glass flying at this point. There's bottles of things being thrown into the crowd, as well as other items being thrown into the crowd. More and more figures that were in black clothing and the masks suddenly appeared from different angles to sort of go towards Fortin and Masons. And I'm stood right by, obviously, the shop window, so I'm trying my best to get out, but it's very, very difficult. I managed eventually to get to one edge as I pushed my way out, and it was hard to get through that resistance and push your way out. But when I did, there was a policeman on the horse, and he was obviously trying to keep us all in, and I just looked at him and said, please just let me out, please just let me out, please just let me out. I'm a teacher, I'm not part of this. I had in my pocket, like, obviously the barrister's phone number. I flashed this phone number at this policeman, and luckily for me, this policeman let me out. And I managed to get out. Obviously, as I was doing so, I was watching all the other policemen come in on the horses and kettle this group of people to try and stop the riots. Now, it took a while for me to get my heart rate back to normal and to get my anxiety down and stress levels down, and think, thank goodness, thank goodness, thank goodness I didn't end up, you know, on the other side of that. I'm free. And when I caught up with my friends, you know, that were waiting for me in the particular area we were supposed to meet in, they were all saying to me, where have you been? Where have you been? I told them exactly what happened. And some of my friends, not to be horrible or anything, they were like, oh, you and your stories, you just exaggerated, maybe it's you and your stories, you know what you're like. I was like, no, I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you exactly what's happened. No, that can't have happened. I'm telling you, this has happened. This has happened. Anyway, we got to the finish line, I guess, of where we were supposed to be for this particular protest. And then we made the walk round to basically the train station again. And obviously it took a while for me to calm down, and it took a while for me to relax and to realize that I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm safe. But I was obviously traumatized by that particular incident. Maybe afterwards I had like post-traumatic stress, thinking what if. And it's still, like, obviously not haunts me till today, but it's an incident that I can't forget. Now, on the train journey home and on the way back home, there was nothing really in the press about what our peaceful protest. But when we got home, boy oh boy, did my friends realise what I was talking about. Now, instead of focusing on the fact that this was a peaceful protest, the media focused on the negatives, and they focused on all the negativity, they focused on all of the things that went wrong, and they focused on this one particular group, like I said, I think they're called Anonymous, that destroyed the protests and the whole point of this. And that saddens me because it takes away the fact that there was peaceful protest. A majority of people that were there were protesting very, very peacefully. And that's the didactic element I'm trying to get at. The media narrative for that particular evening and so on continued, where they basically were saying, you know, all these protesters looting, smashing things, smashing objects. That wasn't actually, you know, the majority of the protest. That might have been a snapshot of 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes of events that occurred. And yes, it was wrong. Yes, those things did happen because I was there. I've just told you about it. But instead of focusing on the positives of the protest, the people were doing things right, the people that were trying to stand up and make a difference. After all, we were there for, you know, make a future work, or whatever it was called. But that lost focus. It lost its focus. And that's why I'm saying to you that there is lots and lots of press at the moment worldwide. And due to COVID, our anxiety levels are high. Due to people marching, protesting, and the fact that the press seem to be only focusing on the negatives, they're not looking at the positives. People are losing sight of what is really going on and why these people and why these individuals are making a stand. Okay, and that's the message I'm trying to get at. Try and focus, try and detach, try and look at the bigger picture, because I think a lot of people, unfortunately, have lost that sight. In fact, they're just noticing and focusing on the small things. I remember one of the protests we'd gone on, I don't know if it was this one that I'm talking about or another one. I remember one particular summer, there was a protest and there was some teenagers, I think, involved in quite a lot of crime. And the result of that was basically saying, well, it's because teachers have such long holidays, such as 6 weeks, it's their fault. So there's no accountability for the parents. There was no accountability or naming and shaming towards people that had got nothing to do with it. It was blame the teachers. That's what I'm getting at. There's always someone with a high-end agenda. There's someone with ulterior motives in trying to manipulate and to undermine and also exaggerate certain particular facts that aren't facts. They're trying to make particular opinions, untruths become reality, and that is not the case. So please, 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 as you are watching the news or reading the news, please be selective, please be a little bit wiser, please be a little bit open-minded. And when you are looking at that particular text, wherever you're getting your source from, just detach and stand back and think, is this really reflecting what is happening, or is this just the narrative of what I'm being told to believe? Is this the propaganda that certain particular newspapers or media press, remember who they're ruled by? Is it their agenda to basically manipulate my thoughts and manipulate the way that I'm meant to act and think and react? Because it's certainly working, isn't it? It's certainly working. I wish it was different, but I just would like you to try, like I said, think openly, think more wisely. Don't fall for the narrative by the propaganda that's been given to you by certain political parties or certain allies that run the media. Be careful, people. Be careful. Don't always fall for it.